Today, on Work It Out with Lauri, we're discussing the bully's master manipulation skills, mobbing through HR, and anchor bias.
There's a lot there, all coming up on Work It Out with Lauri.
Howdy, WVP crew. Welcome to Work It Out with Lauri, the no-nonsense show for anyone navigating workplace bullying, chaos, or straight-up dysfunction. I'm Lauri Lilly, your host. I'm here to help you make sense of all the drama you're experiencing at work.
And I'm Cosmo Esplin, Sir Showrunner and your backstage guide, directly providing Lauri with your questions and workplace dilemmas so you get the practical solutions you need. So what do you say? Let's work it out. Welcome back, WBP fans, to a brand new episode of Work It Out with Lauri. I am Cosmo Esplin, back here introducing your host, the one and only Lauri Lilly. Thanks for joining us once again, Lauri.
Thanks, Cosmo.
Yes, so we're going to be getting into another question here today, and I'm excited to hear what you have to say about it. So I'm just going to go ahead and read the question if you're ready.
I'm ready. Bring it on.
All right, I will. Okay, so this person wishes to remain anonymous, but their question is, quote, "Hi, Lauri. One of the questions that has really felt unanswered is what is the actual infrastructure of HR joining in on mobbing? When it seems like the mobbing has become official company policy, why does it seem like everyone got the same memo for talking points, fabricated performance issues, etc.? Is HR or legal literally telling people we need to find examples of person X doing Y, here are some leading questions to use? In my experience, there were so many odd instances where the same line of questioning would come from various leaders, and it seemed scripted to the point that if I provided adequate examples to refute any performance concerns, they would seem dumbfounded and either repeat the tape, i.e. continue with the same leading questions, or just stare blankly and change the subject, which made me think it wasn't an organic question or idea, but an orchestrated effort. Thanks." I have to say, this question sounds right up your alley, Lauri. So what do you have for us?
It's a great question, and there's several layers to it. So I'm going to start with the reality that bullies have trained for this. They have trained and they have become experts in manipulation for many years, probably started when they were growing up. So they have mastered the art of the manipulation, and now they're bringing it to work. And here's how this works to answer this anonymous person. The person bullying you started a narrative long before you even knew you were being bullied. And when I talk about a narrative, they're planting seeds of doubt. So they're just sharing little snippets about things that you're doing in meetings, the way that they're interacting with you, things that they feel are not appropriate, which, again, that's a very personal decision or a very biased decision. But all of that to say is they have started planting seeds of doubt, and typically, depending on the nuances of who is the person bullying you, if it's your leader, they have already started planting seeds of doubt with HR. And they may have started saying, hey, I think there might be a performance improvement plan in the near future. Here are some of the issues or challenges I'm experiencing with this individual. And they're having discussions with HR, maybe other leaders, right? To say, hey, I'm just kind of taking watch over this person. I'm having a few performance issues. Would you let me know if you experience X, Y, or Z? And so there's just these little seeds of doubt. And this is actually how they start to form a mob. And the mob begins with gossip and this narrative. And they're slowly looking to gain supporters over time. And so they start having more and more conversations. And over time, they gain sponsors. They already are sponsored if they are bullying, but they're gaining more sponsors to gain this mob who are all now going to probably start acting a little different around you. So by the time you get to HR, absolutely. These folks have been engaged in discussions with the bully for some time. They've already been around the block. They are 20 steps ahead of where you are when you finally step in with your grievance, typically. And this is why when you get in these meetings, it seems like there's talking points. So beyond just this narrative, and I want to talk a little bit about what's called anchor bias. So anchor bias is a cognitive bias where people tend to believe the first piece of information they receive about something or someone. So all of these folks who have been hearing these little tidbits from the bully, they've already made decisions about you. That's the basis of their judgment or evaluation or assessment of you going forward. So anything that you now come to the table with in terms of grievances are judged against that original narrative or piece of information shared by the bully.
So I think that mobbing has always been a part of human nature, the ugly side of human nature. But I think it's a good thing that people are starting to recognize those patterns more now because of the digital age and everything that comes with that. These things are much more visible, particularly on the not so bright side of social media.
That's
And
right.
and so, how are people supposed to maybe spot these anchor biases and these mob mentalities that are spreading throughout their work culture?
I think the key point is to remember to be open minded and non judgmental and to use your critical thinking skills. If we do all of these things, we can actually rely on our own thoughts rather than relying on what someone else thinks. And even as it comes to this podcast, I want you all to be thinking critically about your experiences. Of course, there's nuances to every experience and to each unique situation. But generally speaking, does what I'm sharing resonate? And that's up for you to decide, not just because I'm saying it's so, right? So let's make sure that anchor bias isn't in play right here through this podcast.
Yeah, I do not want to be complicit in any anchor bias here,
That's
so
right.
I'm glad that you're encouraging people to think for themselves. Bringing it back to the original question from this person is, how do you think anchor bias is affecting that dynamic with the mob at this point?
This is really challenging because there are a lot of people who simply do not understand what psychological abuse and bullying looks like and is. So not only does the target have the onus on them to describe and try to articulate their experience and convince HR, other legal, other stakeholders that they're being bullied and abused at work, but now they're also going against the anchor bias, right? Where these people have been presented with information probably for some time and they've already got seeds of doubt about this person. So the lens by which they're reviewing this grievance is already highly biased in favor of the bully. So now we get to the point where they're having conversations, the grievance is active. Absolutely, this group of people, whether it's the bully, HR, legal, they are 100% meeting, they're strategizing how to move forward, they're gathering more information on back channeling meetings and things like that. So when you get to a meeting, whether it's with HR or whomever is involved, stakeholders, maybe an investigator, they have information at hand. And that's why it does sound like they all are working off the same sheet of music, so to speak, is they've been told information for some time. They have their own bullet points about your situation that are independent from what you've shared, that are probably straight from the bully. It's a steep hill, right, to overcome, not just in convincing them that you've been abused, but also now there's that anchor bias, which is heavy and strong.
So, how are they supposed to rise up against the flood of mob mentality and anchor bias that's overcoming them in their current job that is somewhat ingrained within the organization, also, perhaps?
And it's very dark when it happens to experience this as a target, to have all of these people speaking the same language. It is very eerie and strange to experience it in real life. And it's very hurtful and painful, too. That's why I talk about, go back to episode 2, we keep referencing it, right? Because of what we know about HR and that their function isn't allowing for any sort of relief and in fact can lead to more harm. So if by chance you do end up with a grievance in HR,
The twisted world of HR.
that's right. And this is a strategy that you agreed upon with your support huddle, which ideally includes a workplace bullying expert,
like Lauri Lilly.
That's right, then the key here is you have to have ironclad documentation. And so that goes back to the very beginning, which is understanding when you're being bullied. And this is our biggest challenge in the bullying world, in my opinion, is people do not understand or know or realize they're being bullied for many, many reasons that I've covered in another episode. And the second that you realize you're being bullied is the second you need to start documenting. And that's not just formal documentation. I have a resource related to documentation that's available for download for anyone interested. But also that's the email follow-ups too. It's not just documenting an email exchange or a chat exchange. It's anything that's said, any sort of an interaction with the bully, you immediately follow up in an email and you cover exactly what was said to make sure that there's agreement, and they can disagree. Let them disagree. Let them come back and say they disagreed, so you have the chance to get on the same page. Do everything you can to get every interaction in writing. It sounds laborious, and it is, and I always say to folks, documentation in and of itself can be very painful, time-consuming, it's energy zapping, and it can be traumatizing. So be gentle and kind to yourself as you go about your workday, and as you figure out how to get into a process of documentation that works for your schedule and isn't just this overwhelming project on the side. Use your best discretion, I guess you could say.
And I would recommend to any of you out there who are hoping to seek the documentation path that you should contact Lauri Lilly. You help your clients with that, correct, Lauri?
Absolutely, I do. That's a big part of it, particularly if we're going down the path of a grievance or an investigation, which does happen in many cases. How you document and how you present your documentation plays a big role in how HR receives, or an investigator is able to take in and receive your documentation and your experience.
Because it's more than just notes in a diary, right?
That's right.
It's very formal.
It's almost an art. I don't like the word story because that has a fictional bias to it, but you have to have an arc to your experience that shows
a true narrative
that shows your experience and how it evolved over time into patterns. And that's where it gets really tricky.
But that is first and foremost how you implement step 1 of overcoming the mob mentality. Thank you for your advice, Lauri.
Thanks, Cosmo. See you next time. Thanks so much for tuning in to Work It Out with Lauri. If today's episode hit home at all, please share it with someone who needs it. And please remember, you deserve to work in peace. Oh, and hey, if you're listening and you're currently a target of a workplace bully and you need help, please feel free to schedule an initial consult with me. It's completely free and completely confidential. I've got your back.
And remember to follow this podcast on YouTube, Spotify, and Substack. Plus, send us your story or your question at workplacebullyingproject.com.
We'll see you next time, and we'll work it out together.